One thing I need to start off by saying is that, interestingly, I'm giving an update on the economy, and I am not an economist. So I'm a business development manager for Aldermore, who, if you don't know, are a specialist lender formed in 2009. The bulk of the business that we do is on buy-to-let as well. And I go and see people like Paul Hampton from Mortgage Solutions, said you're going to give you a shout, to talk about what we can do. And it was Paul who asked me, can Aldermore supply an economist to give this talk today? So I asked, and unfortunately he was busy, but he said, I'll put some slides together, and then you can do the presentation. So I thought, oh, well, you're having a bit of a laugh there. So we had a laugh, and then here I am. And also, a couple of days ago, I was quite worried in that the slides hadn't come through. So I thought, I do need to prepare now a plan B for what I'm going to talk about. So I did what any kind of modern student would do, and I thought, I'll cheat. I'll go into artificial intelligence and see what it can come up with. So I went onto my chat GPT, and I said, let's prepare a report on the UK economy. And it gave lots of pretty boring stuff about, 6th largest economy in the world, GDP growth sluggish trade since Brexit, etc., blah, blah. And I thought, this is not really giving me what I want. So then I thought, prepare a report for me based on predictions for UK housing market. And again, it was talking about shortage of housing, supply-demand issues. We're not building enough houses. This is quite important. I will come back to that, actually. And it kept talking about lots of things about what might happen in 2004, and and I thought, you're kind of leaving it a bit late here. We're 3/4 of the way through the year. And I started to get quite suspicious about ChatGPT when it said that the base rate for the Bank of England was 5.25. And I thought, no, it's not. Came down last month. And then I really lost faith in it when it referred to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. And I thought, well, you're having a mere layer ChatGPT. You've really let yourself down. And then I remembered that the whole point about artificial intelligence is that it's only up to date as of a certain time. It takes all your information from the internet. It doesn't actually take anything which is very modern. Fortunately, I was rescued and the economic slides came through. So here we are. So what am I going to talk about? I'm going to give you an overview. It's not just purely economic data I'm going to talk about. You'll be pleased to know I'm going to be talking about lots of anecdotal stuff that we're getting as well, which is much more modern. The problem about economic data is that very often it's historic, and by the time you see it and you're able to make sense of it, it's out of date already. So I'm going to be giving you some more accurate, up-to-date stuff as well. So we're going to look at data from RICS. We're going to give you a housing overview, what's happening with base rate, what will happen to base rate, latest best guess. I'll explain about swap rates, look at inflation, and then an overview of the rental market, including for the Northeast as well. So, RICS are the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. If you buy a house, you get a survey done on it. The surveyor, the valuer, will be a member of RICS. They survey their members about, so this is like properties which are being valued now. So they're getting feedback from the valuers about what is happening now, or in this case, it's from last month. So it's not bang up to date, but it's as up to date as we can get it. So this is feedback from valuers on the ground. And basically we're getting lots of feedback that housing demand is picking up now as mortgage rates are continuing to fall. Highlights include new buyer inquiries have gone up to +15. I don't need to explain too much about what these were. They do some kind of statistical analysis of the survey results. If it's a positive number, it's good. The bigger the number, the better. That's all you need to know, really. Sales per surveyor going up. Newly agreed sales going from a negative figure now to +6. It's quite important, though. That's the highest level since May 21. So that's the best figure for more than 3 years. The balance of valuers who are expecting sales to increase over the next 3 months has now risen to +37. So they're expecting rent to keep on going up. That's a very strong figure. Again, that's the highest level since before the pandemic. It's the highest figure since January 2000. Okay, so over 4.5 years, best figure. The expectations for house price growth is also now positive and the highest figure for over 2 years. Tenant demand has gone down very slightly month on month, but it still remains very strong at plus 26. And rental price growth expectations are continuing to improve. They're now at plus 38. The chart here, economists do love a good chart. We've got two different lines. You can see that they're tracking each other. One is a balance of new sales instructions, less properties which are being sold, and the other one is house prices. And you can see there's a direct correlation. The most important point to note is that over the past couple of years of it being negative, they are now both positive. That's the main point. So where are we in housing? There's strong parallels between what's happening now and what was happening in January earlier this year. So mortgage rates are now sub 4%, in some cases. It's the lowest they've been for a very long time, as lenders are continuing to bet that the Bank of England base rate is going to continue to fall down. But we were seeing that in January as well. At the start of 24, there was some optimism that the base rate, or inflation specifically, was going to come down. The problem is that it didn't come down as quickly as we expected. As a result, it took longer than we expected then for the Bank of England base rate to come down as well. One of the problems to do with inflation not coming down as quickly, allegedly, was Taylor Swift. People were talking about the Taylor Swift effect in the summer, when with her tour, you had hotels and restaurants artificially inflating prices. The theory is that added about 0.1 to 0.2% to inflation figures, or inflation would have been lower without that happening. Apologies, there's already Swifties in the room, so it's nothing personal, but it did happen. This time, however, in August, UK services inflation has met expectations. This is happening around the world as well. So you may have seen it in America last week. The Fed cut their base rate by 50 bips, sort of 0.5%, which was potentially a little bit more than what people expected. But as one American economist said, if you cut it by 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, it doesn't really matter. 0.25 here or there is not going to make a massive difference. It's not going to bust the economy. What's important is showing is the direction of travel. And the direction of travel for the base rate now is undoubtedly down. But we don't just have economic factors, we have political factors as well, clearly with a new government and the budget next month, day before Halloween, and we are waiting to see what is going to happen with that. There has been warnings of pain. Unfortunately, that has affected consumer confidence. There was a survey last month, basically, which came out, or last week, sorry. It was saying that consumer confidence is now sitting at a level of -20. Again, not going into detail about how the figure is calculated. The point is it's a minus figure, which is not great. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we're talking about there's pain to come. People hear that message. They then tighten their belts. They don't spend as much. So the economic pain becomes a self-fulfilling event. If you tell people there's bad times ahead, they believe it. So they stop spending, and then it happens. We're almost effectively talking ourselves into a recession, effectively. This pain, or like the warnings of pain, have not gone down particularly well. Clearly, there's been some efforts this week at the Labour Party conference to try and, improve that mood a little bit. Even the former former NPC economist Andy Haldane, used to be very high up in the Bank of England, kind of said, yeah, it's all very well being, sort of like well and true, but at the same time, lighten up, But at the same time, the budget is coming next month. We'll wait and see. Maybe they were overplaying how bad it's going to be. We are expecting tax rises, clearly. Apart from that, we don't know. But in terms of where we are in housing, basic law of economics always refer to supply and demand. It's been referred to quite a few times today already. So, this orange line here, this is swap rates. I'll come back to that in a few minutes, don't worry. Swap rates are rising, but that effectively it's a forecast of what the lenders think is going to happen to the Bank of England base rate. So it's You see it's going down. Swap rates affect mortgage rates. Falling swap rates from a mortgage point of view are good. It means that lower mortgage rates are on the way. This line here is a measure, this blue line at the bottom, is a measure of the number of people who are looking to buy a property compared to a 5-year average. And at the moment, you can see it's still below zero. However, the most important point is that within the past month, it has improved quite significantly. So it's slow, but it is improving. This light blue line here on the top, again, is new market appraisals. That's new properties which are coming onto the market, up for sale. So what this is showing is that sellers at the moment are more active than buyers. So that would normally lead you to expect that supply is bigger than demand, which would normally have a negative impact on prices. However, data from Halifax and Nationwide, the two biggest lenders in the country, they don't support that. They're saying that there's not a negative impact on demand. Annual house price growth in August was 2.4%. That was the strongest figure since December 22. Again, without looking at too much detail, the fact that the more important one here is this year-on-year growth. We've had a couple of ropey years, as you would expect. The most important part, though, is that it's now back above negative. Bank of England have also reported mortgage approvals have reached their highest level since September 2022, 2 years ago. Do we all remember what happened in September 2022? The Liz Truss mini budget. As I'm representing a lender, I can't say too much more about that really, but it wasn't great. Where, as a lender, though, in terms of the economy, where we do have some slight concern still, are the number of people who are still on some very low fixed rates, who haven't come off those fixed rates yet, who are still paying for them. So they haven't actually been impacted yet by the big spike in mortgage rates that we've had over the past 2 years. 3 years ago, you could get a 5-year fixed rate on a buy-to-let mortgage for about 2.5%. You could get a 5-year fixed rate mortgage 3 years ago on a residential mortgage for less than 1%. They're still paying that, and will still be paying it for the next 2 years. So lots of these people haven't actually rolled off those fixed rate yet, and had the spike. So they've still got a little bit of a bit like a payment shock, a little bit of pain to come. But overall, we do feel that demand will continue to grow. The budget next month is not going to be quite as bad as what was being made out. Maybe it was a degree of setting expectations. But Andrew Bailey at the Bank of England just on Monday this week said they think the path for interest rates will be downwards. Okay, so there's no real doubt about that. Rates are coming down. One of the issues, though, is that we are not going to return to the very low or near zero interest rates that we had before. It's just not going to happen. So, something you might start reading about in the coming months as well, as the base rate does start to come down. You might start to read a bit more about what we're now calling the neutral rate of interest, okay? And this is the rate of interest that a central bank, not just for the Bank of England, but around the world, for any kind of basically central government bank. It's a rate of interest whereby they're not looking to stimulate the economy, and they're also not looking to slow down the economy either. It is just purely like a neutral rate. The point is the neutral rate of interest is for every country really around the world has been rising. The reasons for this, several reasons. We've got demographic trends, more people retiring, less desire for savings. There's been opportunities in artificial intelligence and the green transition, but they are going to require very large levels of investment. Globalization has gone into reverse. China used to be a force for inflation. Deflation, sorry. Now China is a force for inflation. And also the pandemic has basically clearly resulted in very, very high amounts of government borrowing. At some point, lenders want their money back. So, the thing to bear in mind is that anything that creates greater demand for investment increases what lenders can ask for. What lenders have is cash. People need to borrow cash for this very large investment, which is required for things like the AI and the green opportunities, as I said. With that high demand, it means that lenders can then ask for more. This applies to savers as well. So obviously, if you're a saver, if you're lucky enough, if rates are high, you can earn more. That's all good. From a lender point of view, though, if they need more cash, as to come in as savings in order for them then to lend it out, they need to play about with the savings cash rates as well. So, under these factors, neutral interest rates across the world are rising. Capital Economics, you're a think tank. And it's important to clarify this is an estimate and it will vary from person to person. They estimate that the neutral rate of interest in the UK is now 3%. But to put that into perspective, at the end of the 2010s, that was 0.5%. Okay, so that's how much it's changed in a relatively short space of time. We predict the range is somewhere between 3 and 3.5%. So what's going to happen, in other words, though, is that when the Bank of England are cutting their rate as part of the cycle, when it gets down to that 3 to 3.5% level, it will stop. Okay, so we're definitely not going back to the near zero rates that we've enjoyed before. UK market forecasts for the base rate are we will be somewhere between 3.25, 3.5% by the end of next year. But that's still very, very significant from where we are just now. You know, we've just gone from 5.25 to 5. We're predicting, is basically 1.5 to 1.75% rate cuts to come over the course of the next 12 to 15 months. The official Aldermore forecast is that it's going to be at 3.5%. I'll emphasize again, if it's 3.5, 3.75, 3.25, it doesn't make a massive difference. There is a joke about economists, basically, that if you put two economists in a room, they will come out with 3 different opinions, So anyone who comes out and tells you what the rate will definitely going to be, take it with a pinch of salt, because, some things can happen between now and then. But we certainly anticipate one more base rate cut this year, probably in November. So it'll end the year then at 4.75, and then base rate cuts next year of at least another 1%. Something I said earlier, again, this is important to emphasize. Don't worry about, is it going to be 3.75, 3.5? What's more important is the direction of travel, which is definitely down the way. I mentioned swap rates earlier. I'm not going to get too technical about it, but this is how lenders price mortgages. And swap rates are when basically lenders, banks, swap money with each other, one getting a fixed rate of interest, one getting a variable rate of interest. To cut a long story short, what it is, it's a forecast of what a bank thinks the Bank of England base rate is going to be doing, typically over the course of the next 2 years or 5 years. What we have here, these are like 2-year swaps recently. So you can see what happened 2022, say no more. The most important point, though, is that swap rates have been coming down this year quite substantially. This light blue line is your typical 75% 2-year mortgage rate. So the point is, you can see just how close the correlation is between what the swap rates are compared to what mortgage rates are that lenders can offer. Swap rates are basically affected by a range of different factors. Predictions for inflation over the course of the next few years, market sentiment, geopolitical factors, range of other inputs. One thing which is interesting in terms of the geopolitical concerns, and this is the last time that I will mention Liz Truss in the mini budget, but 2 years ago, because of what happened then, there was a premium placed on top of UK pricing. And we are probably still paying for that now, but it will wash out eventually. So, inflation. We're now back at 2%. A lot of the issues in inflation which were driving towards rises in inflation before have now washed through the system and are now historic. The pandemic, the war in Ukraine, rising energy costs as a result of increases in gas, etc. as well. However, it's not all good from that point of view, and there are some headwinds coming towards inflation. When we are now forecasting that inflation will now be up at 3% by the end of this year. So for example, we already know that energy prices are going to be going up actually next week. From the beginning of October, they're going up again. And in terms of the current futures prices for energy costs, we predict that they're going to be going up again in the first half of next year as well. Okay, so that's not necessarily good news. Services inflation continues to come down, but only slowly. The main point is, what I'm saying is that what's going to be happening over the course of the next 6 to 9 months, inflation will be on a downward trend, but it could be a little bit bumpy. It's not going to be a continual decline. So we've got some rises coming before then. For some people, this is quite good. If you're a savers, higher interest rates, then you benefit from that kind of thing. If you've got savings and you can get basically a better rate of interest, then you can spend that on stuff like holidays and your accommodation. They're higher just now, but as rates fall, that's then going to result in a deflationary factor, which will be quite good. But goods inflation is on the increase again. There was deflation. That's now stopped. We now predict that goods inflation will now be back to above 1% by the end of this year. So that, combined with the energy costs, is going to have a negative impact, unfortunately. Okay, looking at the rental market. So market rental growth has slowed from 6.6% in April to 5.4% in July. That's the lowest figure in 3 years. I think my point on that is that, yes, it's slowed, but it's still growing. So growing, but slowing. What we still have, of course, is an imbalance between demand and supply. Demand is still bigger than the supply which is available. RICS are forecasting that these is going to basically settle down to around about 4.5% of growth, basically within the next year, or certainly in the first half of next year. Supply and demand mismanagement puts pressure on rents, especially in more affordable locations as well. So what's happening, it's not on here, but we're seeing slower rental growth focused on the larger cities. So the places that have had significant rental growth, they're now slowing down. What that does happen though, is that so their rents are slowing down, it puts pressure on rents in adjoining areas. So their rents just go up as people move out of the cities where they can't afford. Supply and demand. If demand is higher than supply, price, in this case rent, basically continues to go up. Just in terms of showing like what's happened to rents over the few years, this is a chart from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. And it talks about the surge or the rise in rents in urban areas in particular. So going back here to the late teens, rent growth, these figures are just like it's the annual increase in rent. So trending along at probably around about between 0 and 5% for several years. January 21, rent started to increase massively to above 10% a year, and it stayed like that for a while. This pink figure here, just so you know, is the same figure really, but that's the figures which are provided by the ONS. The ONS do things differently because of how they measure it. You get like a statistical lag and how long it takes. So, sometimes when you see ONS data, take it with a pinch of salt. Just bear in mind it's taken from data which is potentially quite old. This one I think is really interesting. This is the rental market. It's a number of inquiries per home. So this line at the bottom here, 2019. So landlords used to average round about between 5 to 10 inquiries per property. Very similar in 2020. 21 started to go up, spiking up a little bit. 2022 is this blue line here. You can see it's approaching 50 inquiries per home every time one came on the market. Between 40 and 50 inquiries for every single one. So it's pretty clear what that's going to do to rents as well. It just drives rents up. 2023, a bit lower. 2024 is this figure here in the purple. So it's gone down a bit compared to where we were. That's clearly unsustainable. But this figure here, still averaging around about 20 new inquiries per home. You know, it's not bad. You know, and as Paul basically said earlier as well, Paul Champlina, you know, it's a case of, that's, you know, again, it just drives up rent. And the more inquiries per home you can get, the better tenant you can pick as well. What we also see, though, as mortgage rates come down, lower mortgage rates facilitates leavers from the rental market for them to go and buy their homes. But we see the opposite of that as well. So when mortgage rates spiked in 2022 and 2023, what happened is it drives actually a spike in rental because people then can't afford to be a homeowner occupier themselves. What we will see as well is like slightly lower demand as a result of things like more or like fewer foreign students coming in. They can't take their families anymore. So that's going to have like a negative impact on demand, but we'll wait and see just exactly how much that is. This was touched on earlier as well. So how much are tenants now paying on rent? So it's a really sort of growing share of their income is now going on rent. Some potential question marks over how sustainable that is. So this line at the top here is the market rent and the percentage of median full-time salary. We're looking over here. So it's about 40% of the typical average median salary is now getting paid on rent. This blue line here is new tenant rent as a percentage of their income. It's approaching 30%. Now, normally, you would expect you'd get to some kind of point whereby that is not sustainable. We actually thought that point would have passed before now. What's happening, though, is that in the housing market, you are seeing more resilience than what people expected. And some of that is a benefit still from what happened in the pandemic. People were able to boost up their savings. So there's evidence now that people are now having to pay a lot more for their rent, but they're dipping into their savings to pay it. Or if they can't pay it, then their parents have got savings. So in other words, it's the bank of mum and dad which are now coming in and they're helping people pay for the rent as well. So it's still there just now, but you have to question basically how sustainable would that be. So rents have been robust, and that's prevented a big rise in buy-to-let redemptions. This is Bank of England figures for the buy-to-let market. Top part is new advances. The bottom part is mortgages getting repaid. This black line in the middle here is the balance. So if there was going to be a wide-scale sell-off of buy-to-let properties, this figure would be much, much bigger than that. This black line would be like more down here, and it isn't. So well, sometimes we keep talking about some people are leaving the buy-to-let market. Sure. Then basically, we're not seeing that in terms of the Bank of England figures. Okay. 2 minutes? Right, okay, sorry. Very quickly, market in the northeast. The average rent has risen by over 9% over the last year. Newcastle has performed particularly well. Darlington is doing particularly well as well. In summary, final page. Basically, there are some headwinds coming. We're not going to get away from that. There are some issues. Basically, if you, without going over what I've already said before, if you buy the right property in the right area and get the right tenant, then there's still plenty of opportunity out there. Thanks very much.